is learning English so hard? I have 2 reasons that learning English is hard and how to make it easier. Welcome to English Coach 3 T's. I'm Tanya, and I also have a story that I think is going to help you understand how to make learning easier. So let's jump into reason number 1. Reason number 1 that learning English is so hard is because the way we were taught to learn when we were children in school isn't the best way to learn a language, and in fact, it can even make it harder. So to help you understand this, I want you to think about when you were a child in school and what it was like. Were most of the teachers you had the kind of teacher who made you feel like you know how to learn and they're just there to help you with the process? Did they say, or maybe they didn't say it, but you got the feeling that they were the person with all of the knowledge and you weren't, and they were going to give it to you? Did you ever get told that to learn, a part of it is learning how to follow your heart and find what works best for you? Or were you told something like, there's one way to learn? Maybe you weren't told this, but you got the feeling that there's one way to learn and that you needed to get it right, or you were going to be given a mark or a grade that you were wrong. Maybe you got the feeling that that one way was something like the teacher would write something on the chalkboard or the whiteboard and give you the answers, and then she would ask the class who knew the answers, and there were a few kids who did, but it wasn't you, or you knew and that made you feel better than the rest of the class? Or was it something like a book where you learned from a book and here's all the stuff, and then we're going to give you a test, and if you don't get the answers right, we're going to mark them wrong and give you, again, a grade or a mark? I'm wondering if you were taught that learning mistakes is a good thing or a bad thing. And here's why. If you're going to learn a language, you will make mistakes. In fact, you've probably heard that learning a language, you've probably heard that in order to learn a language, you have to make mistakes. It's an important part of the process. So what would be a better way to learn? Well, first of all, learning that making mistakes is not only okay, it's an important part of the process. In fact, I'm still learning English, even though I was born. Well, I wasn't born, but I've been learning English since I was born. But of course, I'm still making mistakes. In fact, I just told one of our Women's Speak Better classes today, the only difference between me and you is that I've made more mistakes than you. And that isn't saying something nice. That's the truth. That's a fact. Even native speakers are making mistakes. And the way that native speakers learned was to make a lot of mistakes. So I sometimes tell my students, go out there and make mistakes, because this is one of the best ways to learn. Now, is it a good idea to learn from our mistakes? Of course. But there are many different ways to do that. And so my hope when I'm working with you is that I can help you to find the way that works best for you. And in fact, there are different ways to find that. One of those ways might be to use trial and error. Just a hint for this video. When you see words in all capital letters like trial and error, that's a phrase or a word I'm going to show you more about at the end of this video in the short English lesson. So what do I mean by trial and error? I mean, try something and see if it works. Error, make a mistake and learn from it. This is a great way to learn. Also, another way that can make English learning easier is to realize that you have your own unique way of learning, and you can find that. You can find it on your own. You might have a teacher that can help you to find it. This is my goal, is to help my students find the way that works for them. And maybe you learn it from a friend or a family member, conversation exchange. There are many, many ways to learn. And I think this is key to making English easier to learn, is to know there are many ways to learn and finding the way that works best for you. Also, we have found, I should say, it has been learned that testing isn't always the most effective way to learn. In fact, I would say it's not an effective way to learn. If it works for you, if you love to take tests or you love to do workbooks, then that's awesome. You should keep doing that. So I'm curious, what are some of the ways you have found to learn English that seems really helpful? It's working for you. It's something that is useful. Let me know in the comments below and read what other people have said to get ideas for yourself. All right, let's take a look at the second reason learning English is so hard, and then I'm going to share a story with you that I think will help. So the second reason that learning English is so hard is that there is a lot of just plain wrong information on the internet. And if it's not completely wrong, there's a lot of misleading information on the internet. So how can we overcome this? Well, the first step will help with that. When you start to realize that there isn't one person or one group of people out there who knows everything there is to know about learning English, then you'll start to understand that there are a lot of different people with a lot of different ideas. You can take what you like and leave the rest. This is one of my mottos to live by, not just in learning a second language, but in many aspects of my life. And I think it's super helpful. So let's talk about the wrong information on the internet. So there are a lot of people, a lot of teachers on the internet that are saying this is the way to learn, that are saying this is the way to learn, or this is the only way. Also, I'm sure you've heard something about being able to become fluent in 30 days or master English in 2 months or whatever it is. This is just not true. Now, am I saying it's not possible? I'm not saying it's not possible. It might be possible. I have never experienced it or seen anyone that has done it. But if you took, if you immersed yourself in the language and studied with a teacher maybe 8 to 10 hours a day, you could learn a lot. You could learn a lot. However, I think the vast majority of us would be very tired at that point. I think that our brains would begin to shut down, and it's not the best way to learn. In fact, another thing I've heard on the internet that is a little misleading is that to learn a language, you have to be consistent and practice every day for a long time every day. Okay, consistency is an important thing, and I'm going to talk about that in my Right Start Workshop 2023. But what we think of as consistent, and especially if you look up the word in the dictionary, may not be, probably isn't what works for you in learning a language. In fact, there are many, many different ways to be consistent. I don't know how many students I've had at this time, but it's a lot. Several hundred, maybe several thousand students, and I have never seen any two students that learn exactly the same way. So I want to take a minute to talk about the teachers that maybe led you in the wrong direction or said something that was misleading. I truly believe those teachers, I think, were doing the best they could with the information they had, even if it wasn't so great. Teachers in general really want to help people, but that in itself is also a misunderstanding. Teachers are really there to empower you. And yes, we help people. Yes, we teach things like vocabulary and grammar. And it really has to do with the way teachers are teaching and the way you feel when you're in that class, whether it's a group class or an individual class. This is really important. You've heard me say before that having fun is a really important part of the process, and that I don't mean it's always a party, but that it should be enjoyable. It should be something that you 90 or 95 or 99% of the time feel like it's an enjoyable process. And I really believe that it's my job, it's teachers' job to help create that environment. And maybe we don't know exactly how to do it with each person because there's so many different ways to learn, but hopefully we're a team. The teacher and the student are a team to find that place where it's 99% enjoyable. Okay, I want to share a story with you because I think it is a really great way to begin to understand what I'm teaching you here. Which reminds me that if you don't understand this completely today, that's okay. It takes time to go from one way of doing things to a completely different way of doing things. So be really patient with yourself and your process as you're learning this. So many years ago, more than 20 years ago, I was teaching art, and I had a class for adults who wanted to learn art in any medium, meaning painting, drawing, sculpture, whatever that media might be. So in the class, I had students that were using watercolor paints, acrylic paints, oil paints, drawing with pencil, drawing with colored pencil, using all different types of medium to create the art that they wanted to create. I had a woman in that class who had been to many art classes to learn to paint with watercolors. And after the first class, she told me that in every class she had taken, whether it was 8 weeks long, a year long, whatever, she left the class feeling like her paintings weren't good enough, that she didn't know how to paint, that there was something that she needed to learn that she couldn't figure out. And the worst part to me was that she felt like she should stop painting because she wasn't good enough. And after one day in this class, she told me, in one class, I feel more empowered and I think I can do this. I think I can learn to paint. So what did I teach her? You know, what I showed her or shared with her is that the painting was within her, and that while some rules and ways of doing something may be helpful and it might be a good idea to learn those, mostly she needed to express herself with the watercolors in the paper in whatever way felt enjoyable and fun. And she started doing that and making amazing watercolor paintings. Now, the other thing I need to share is at this time, I was not a watercolor painter. I still, I would say I dabble in watercolor, but I love to paint with watercolor. Now, actually, this woman was an inspiration to me, but this wasn't something I could tell you, now here is how you paint with watercolors, and you must do this, and you have to do that, and if you don't do this, it's wrong. I could not have told you that. I could not have taught you the way to paint watercolors. We go maybe 3 weeks into the class, which was about an 8-week class, and a new student is coming to join the class. And when she walked in the door, she kind of looked around to see if she could find the teacher, and she walked right over to the woman with the watercolor paints, who had told me when she came into the class, she thought she couldn't paint with watercolors. And the new student thought she was the teacher because her watercolor paintings were so incredible. And it was one of my greatest joys as a teacher to hear her say, I just learned this in the last 3 weeks because I learned to bring it out of myself. And in fact, I'm getting truth bumps right now. I might even cry because I taught someone. I wouldn't even say I taught her. I helped to empower her. I helped her with some of the things I knew about art, yes. With some of the things I knew about watercolor, yes. But I could be a part of her journey. We worked together. And it is incredible to me. I have seen this process over and over with piano students, when I homeschooled my children, with English as a second language students, with teaching myself many different things like writing. I came out of the public school system here in the United States thinking I was a bad writer. And now I love to write. And so I have many stories I could share with you, and I would love to share them with you at some point. So I'm so excited to share the vocabulary from this story that might be helpful in understanding the story. So let's jump right in. The first words I mentioned that I'd like to tell you a little more about are graded versus marked. So I said that a teacher graded or marked the paper. And when do you use which? In the United States, we use the word to grade or graded the paper. And in other countries, they use the word marked to mean the same thing. In the United States, when we say marked, we typically mean something like the teacher marked my answer wrong. So it's a little bit different. The next thing I said is that one of the ways that is a good way to learn is by trial and error. I talked a little bit about it being that you try something and you make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes. So the reason this is such a good way to learn is because you try out different things, find out what works, find out what doesn't work, and then you have a better way that works for you. Another example with this phrase would be, let's just use trial and error until we find the solution. I marked a sentence that I used in the present perfect because I have so many students who tell me they need help with the present perfect and the past simple and when to use which one. So in this sentence I said, we have found that testing isn't the best way to learn. So what I meant was we found this or we learned this over time and we're still learning about what works best. If it was done, we found that testing doesn't work, we would say it happened, it's done, and it's over with. But because it is something that happened over time and maybe it's still happening, we need the present perfect. I said that there was a lot of information on the internet that is just plain wrong or misleading. When we say something is just plain wrong, we say this to emphasize, but also to say that it is simply wrong. There is no if, and, or but about it. There's another phrase, meaning there's no ifs, ands, or buts, means you can't say, well, if this, or and that, or well, but. There's no arguing with this particular thing. And I said if the information isn't wrong, sometimes it's misleading. Misleading is when you're given information that might be true, but instead of being straightforward, it might be leading you in a different direction that doesn't really work. It's misleading you, it's leading you in the wrong direction. And then I talked about overcoming obstacles. So when we have an obstacle or something that we can't get past, something that stops us, we need to overcome it. We need to get over it or go around it. But either way, we're overcoming the obstacle. We're getting past the obstacle to get to where we want. If we overcome our obstacles in learning English, then we can continue on our journey to fluency. I told you a story about a class when I was teaching art, and I said I had a class for adults who wanted to learn how to make art in any medium, or we could say with any medium. A medium is something you use to create art. I have two examples here. One is a watercolor palette, and the other is a bag of colored pencils. I also like to use these colored markers just for creating art for fun or when I'm dabbling in art. There's another word I used. I said I dabble in watercolors, which is true. To dabble in something doesn't have to be just about art. It could be in sports or cooking or any other thing. It just means that you enjoy trying new things in cooking or whatever it is, and that it's okay with you if you never get to the level where you're a professional. Maybe you will get to that level, maybe you won't, but the important thing is to enjoy the process. I said that my student felt like there was something that she was doing wrong that she needed to figure out. This is a really great phrasal verb, to figure out. It means that we need to determine how something works or discover how something works. It's an extremely common phrasal verb, so I know you're going to want to use it in your conversations, and you could come up with many examples. Another example might be, I need to figure out how to use my computer. I need to learn how to use my computer, or I need to discover how to use my computer. It's unlikely that we would say discover, but that's kind of what it means. I said that I was very honored to be a part of the journey with this student who was learning to paint with watercolors. And I said it just meant that we would be doing this together, working together. But I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the word journey, because we can use this word to say we want to take a journey. For instance, I'm going to take a journey into the forest as an example. Maybe I will walk, maybe I will hike, maybe I will drive in a car. Any of these could be taking a journey. But we can also use it like I did with something that's not physically happening, like riding a bicycle or driving in a car or something like this. Learning English is a journey. We start from one place and we move towards another. And the journey can be a long journey, but hopefully we can work together and make that journey a little more enjoyable, a little easier. I realized while I was planning this video that you're watching it on my dad's birthday. And although he passed away many years ago, this means a lot to me because a lot of the things I shared with you today, a lot of the ways I learned to learn, a lot of the ways I learned to teach come from my dad and his gentle ways. I'm glad to be on this learning journey with you. If you're enjoying these videos, please give us a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. It is the best compliment you can give us to share this video with someone else who also wants to be fluent. And if you'd like to watch another video with a story about my dad where you can learn English at the same time, give this video a try and I'll see you there.